We've made it. We've made it to what might be the podcast, the video that people might watch the most I produce all year long because of what happened in 2024. The college football playoff parlay. We're going to give it to you. We've got shiny videos, graphics coming. We've got all the ways that maybe, just maybe, you along with me might hit a 25,000 to 1 parlay. How are we going to get there? We're going to talk all about it, break it down for you, whether you love gambling, whether you have no idea how to invest. I'm going to try to make it as easy as possible in this video, and that hopefully come December we can all cash in on a big parlay. Before we get to that, we got to tell you about the businesses that make this show, Levac and Goss, possible. Shout out to our guy Levac, who is in Disney enjoying his time, but so many awesome businesses. Shout out to Herbie's Burgers. There are no locations now on Lark Street. Shout out to the AF1. He always gives us support and all the great things that league's done for us. And one big extra shout out to Mohawk Honda. It's Mohawk Honda where they always go out of their way to please you. I have a wonderful Pilot. I love my vehicle. My wife has a wonderful Odyssey. She loves her vehicle. I want you to have that same bragging right when it comes to your ride. Mohawk Honda can help you find that vehicle today. People that you can trust during the car buying experience. Greg Johnson's the man. Lindsay Harridan is fantastic. The whole Harridan family has helped so many people, not just in the capital region, but in upstate New York, find a ride for their family that they're going to continue to love. Look, things change, right? You might add a few kids. You might add a few car seats. You're limited to what you can buy. New, pre-owned, used, whatever you're looking for. Mohawk Honda and the whole team there wants to help you find the vehicle. Shout out to my guy Cam McKenna, who's helped me so often find a vehicle that my family continues to change. Look, I mentioned the Pilot, right? I've been in a CRV before as well. So many different rides that you can find right there in Glenville, New York. A couple programming reminders. We will be back broadcasting live from Mohawk Honda on Monday, September 14th. We will also be broadcasting live on Thursday, September 17th from the Hideaway at the Saratoga Lake Golf Club. So get ready for that show. And also on Monday, September 21st, we'll be at that new location on Lark Street at Herbie's Burgers as the Giants take on the Rams. Look for a nice shiny graphic on. Look, I got love for AI. At least ChatGPT. Maybe not all of AI. But ChatGPT has been helping us make those graphics. So 3 live shows have been confirmed for September. But if this is your first time coming over on the podcast side or the YouTube side, Levac and I have content every single day, Monday through Friday, weekdays. About an hour, give you everything you need to know in the world of sports, and those live shows on the way. Levac's back next week. Some more content on the way. We still got a college football season preview on the way this week. Our guy Brian Mariano and Andrew Champagne will do a Travers preview. But our guy Sean Martin's going to hop on. All good things. So let's get into this. Let's tell a little quick story, and we'll tell you how we're getting to that monster parlay. So if you're joining us for the first time, back in 2024, I had the parlay you dream of. 24,613 to 1 shot. And I'll give you a little story that maybe my close friends and family don't know about. Definitely my family, I hope. But look, life was changing a little bit for old Ghazi Bear back in November of 24. Baby Abe was born. And if those of you who listen on the radio side, you know, like financially things were changing a little bit. My role changed at the station because of what it is to be in corporate radio. So I don't know if we needed the money, but thank goodness we got it. You know, my wife and I would probably dispute the need, want, have to have. But my gosh, when $10,000 hits your bank account, that's pretty awesome. Uncle Sam, not as much. And that's not me bragging. It's the truth of it, man. Like, it just happened. We got there. We won. Everyone has the golden ticket that hopefully they can cash it whenever it happens. I want to do it again. I want to celebrate like this again. Sorry for podcast people in your headphones. This is going to get a little loud, sir. I'm fired off in 2 minutes. Turn down your headphones a little bit. This is what it sounds like when you win 10K. That's my wife's oddly socked pink feet, her sister Vivian, her friend Melody. My son Rex at that point was wearing a Blues Clues helmet, head. Baby Abe was somewhere sleeping. I'm sure he woke up. That's little Wes there, two sons. Man, seeing them grow now the last year is awesome. Okay, so let's break it down like this, right? Here's how I want people to understand this. These are two massive things before we pull up the shiny graphics and walk you through how we're getting here and everything else. Here's two massive things I want you to remember when we're doing this parlay. Parlay is a risky wager. So I would remember that you don't have to do 8 legs or 7 legs. You'll notice throughout this conversation, I'm going to give you teams and their odds. So if you want, as I like to say, chop it up and say, guys, I'm only taking one of those teams to make the college football playoff. I'm only making 2. You can mix and match this thing however you want. So I don't want to hear the complaints come December, whether it's on a YouTube or a podcast. I can't believe you gave me a 25,001 ticket. It didn't hit. I put all my entire mortgage on. I'm not saying to do that. And in fact, for those who remember from 2024, I do what's called a round robin bet. Now, DraftKings is a great spot to do this. Hopefully, they'll be joining us as a sponsor like they did a few years ago. But if you don't understand what a round robin bet is, DraftKings sort of lays it out for you. So, well, a little spoiler alert here. Rather than 7 legs, we're going to have an 8-leg parlay we're going to build together here. So, in DraftKings, you can go and say, you know what? I'm going to do a round robin. I want every combination of 5 out of 8. Or I want every combination of 6 out of 8. Now, DraftKings will tell you on the app where exactly how many bets that is. So say, for instance, I believe 6 out of 8 is 28 bets. If you bet 50 cents on 28 bets, 28 divided by 2 is 14. That's a $14 wager. Now, your wager may not pay as much, how the odds get there and everything else, but I would always recommend those 2 things. 1, chop up your bets. 8's fun, but don't leave, I love this guy, Harborside Hell, don't leave money on the floor. If you said you had 4 of those 8 teams that were getting in the postseason and you didn't wager on it, you didn't win any money, well, that's foolish. Make sure you put some small wagers on that. Also, the round robin bet. Back to 24, I round robined all those bets. So people would always ask me, like, how much do you actually wager? How much do you wager? I added up all those round robin bets, so they were really, I think it was, the final total was $57. Again, just talking about unit pricing here. But it wasn't a $57 parlay. It was small 6 out of 8 wager, small 7, small 8. All those things added up and accumulated over time because of the combinations. I hope that makes sense. Okay. So we're going to pull up a nice fancy graphic right now. And I don't mind that the first team's going to pop up. So you're done seeing my stupid mug. You got 7 minutes of my face here. And now you'll see this. You'll see this wonderful, ta-da, Gaz's 25,001 parlay. Now, if you're listening on the audio side, we're going to provide the video with you too, but we will walk you through this. Okay. So you've got 8 columns here. So the first thing we have listed here is the Oregon Ducks at minus 320. So what you're going to see throughout this video is that when another team is added, you'll see what the parlay would pay. So right now, if you just bet the Oregon Ducks to get to the college football playoff, it's a minus 320 bet. For our wagerers who have never done this before, go think of it like this. You would need to wager $320 to win $100. Juice, Vig, let's not confuse people too much. Let's just do it like that, right? Minus 320, $320 wager you need to make $100. You can combo however you're going to do your unit size and stuff like that. Why do I have Oregon as number 1 on this sheet? Well, how we're going to break this down is my confidence level in these teams making the college football playoff. I'm not picking a national championship. That's for Sean Martin's preview with me coming up later on this week. I'm not telling you who's going to win the conference. I'm telling you from an odds perspective, in a wagering perspective, how we build this parlay and what makes the most sense. So I believe in Oregon more than any other team this season with the price they're listed at to get to the postseason at minus 320. There are teams who have better odds to reach the college football playoff. There are teams who have worse odds to reach the playoff. But if you told me what's my favorite wager to make and how we're going to build this parlay, Oregon. Why Oregon? 2 years ago, I thought the Ducks could win the national championship, and the Ducks were in line to win the national championship. The problem was, in the Rose Bowl, they played Ohio State for a second time. Gosh, felt like a third time. Did they play 100 times that season? Ohio State was not the 9th or 8th best team in the 2024 bracket, because that year we wanted to have Boise State and Arizona State and all these teams get buys. It should have been Ohio State and Oregon in the national title game. They play in the quarterfinals. Ohio State smokes them. Oregon doesn't get it done. Oregon can't get it done again last season. But this roster is loaded. I'm not the biggest Dante Moore fan in the world. I do find it foolish that the number 2 projected overall pick wanted to go back to school, but maybe he is the first one of setting this new thing of I'll just take a ton of money and I'll take $4 or $5 million, please and thank you, and I'll figure out the pro thing a little later. I don't mind this thing. It sounds kind of cool. So Oregon is my first pick here to make the college football playoff, and the team I feel the most confident in will get to the postseason. Now, we move on to team number 2. That's the Indiana Hoosiers. So on your YouTube side, you're going to see minus 147. So if you were to just do a 2-team college football playoff with Oregon and Indiana, minus 147 would be your payback. So again, you wager $147, you get $100. Indiana alone is listed at minus 350, again, according to DraftKings odds to make the postseason. That's actually a higher odd than Oregon. DraftKings believes it's more likely that Indiana may get to the postseason than Oregon. Why am I betting? Why am I including Indiana? Well, think back to 2 years ago. Indiana lost just one regular season game that year, and people doubted Indiana the whole way through. They have that opening round matchup with Notre Dame, and Sean McDonough on the broadcast is trashing Indiana and saying they shouldn't be on the field. Indiana rallies in that game. They keep it close. Notre Dame goes on to the national championship, eventually losing to Ohio State. But Indiana goes on the next year. They had one of the great stories in the history of college sports. Hell, in the history of American sports. Let's be real about it, right? And they win the national championship. They're the worst team ever in the Power 4 programs and record-wise, and they won a national championship. Curt Cignetti's that dude. As I said, that's a cold-blooded killer, man. You ever watch the show Dexter? Like, when that dude's in between the lines, he is a psychopath in the nicest way possible. I told this to Levac the other day. You know those people who would step on your throat to win a game? Cignetti would not only step on your throat, but be annoyed there's something under his boot while he does it. That man's sick. Now, if Indiana's name was Nebraska, if Indiana's name was Notre Dame, Ohio State, Michigan, you get my point here, USC, this wouldn't even be a conversation. So you come off a that's Indiana, see, I even slipped right there. You come off a 1-loss regular season the season previous, battle in the playoff. You win the national championship and run the table the next year. Sure, a ton of stuff went in their favor. Sure, they had the number 1 draft pick and Heisman Trophy winner, who preseason last year wasn't talked about in that spot. But you do all that and you're doubted this season? So let's just think of it like this, right, in the Big Ten title game. If Oregon and Indiana face off in the Big Ten title game, you're going to hear me say this point like 3 or 4 more times, but it's important to remember this. We saw in 2024, SMU was not taken out of the playoff when they lost in the longest conference game-winning kick in the history of any conference title game when Clemson beat them at the buzzer. SMU lost the conference title game. They don't get taken out. Same thing about Alabama last season. Alabama lost in the SEC title game. Alabama was a participant in the college football playoff. So either one of these teams, seeding-wise, might be affected. But if they get to the Big Ten title game, which I think they're going to do, I think they're both going to go. So I take those 2 odds there. I like Oregon and I like Indiana as my top 2 teams. We move on to number 3. And now the helmets go away. We see plus money pop up for the first time, and that's this Texas Tech Red Raiders. This team is loaded. My gosh, you want to talk about the portal. You want to talk about NIL. Texas Tech's donors and boosters have come out publicly, confined the quotes, and said, we don't know how long the Wild West of college sports is going to be. This is our moment. We're going to spend a ton of money. We're going to redo the stadium. We're going all in. We don't know if it'll ever happen again. They are loaded. Now, I know the offseason's been about the quarterback and whether or not he can. Is he allowed to gamble on games? Look, we've moved on from him. Sorsby, done. I don't even know how important he was going to be completely honest, because it's all across the board. It's the D-line, the offensive line. My gosh, David Bailey was a Stanford kid. He came over to Texas. I saw the stat that the East-West Shrine Bowl, which is a long-time classic all-star game, added the list. 1,000 kids are on that list. The most of any team is Texas Tech with 30. 30 pro guys on this roster. The stats last year we saw floated around, like the Florida State team with Jameis Winston, that the average margin of victory for Texas Tech was in that category. Who are they going to lose to? Who? I can't find anybody. Now, here is one scenario that could play out. Again, you had Indiana, Oregon, and Texas Tech plus 153. But a scenario that could play out with the Red Raiders, who by themselves are listed at minus 200, would be they play BYU. And BYU's gotten close, right? The Cougars and everything going on over there in the program, and probably at times underrated a little bit of how good they've been. So if Texas Tech and BYU play each other in the Big 12 title game, and let's assume Texas Tech is undefeated, and let's say BYU suffers a loss and they play Notre Dame, we'll get to, Fighting Irish fans, relax. We'll get to you in a second. But let's say BYU suffers one loss, and it's a non-conference game, okay? And Texas Tech goes undefeated in the conference. So you're telling me that a one-loss BYU might get left out of the postseason? I do. I think that is possible. How many times are they going to screw BYU? But BYU could be here. See, there's the juggling act, right, with BYU. So I don't know what to do with the Cougars. Someone can make a really good case they should be here. Just didn't feel confident enough to put them in. Haven't seen the committee select them yet. But that's where it gets tricky for Texas Tech, right? Like, Texas Tech gets to the college football playoff. They could be undefeated going to the Big 12 title game. So now we go back to what I said 3 minutes ago. If you're not going to punish SMU in 24, you're not going to punish Alabama in 25, now you're going to punish Texas Tech? We just set a standard that you can't do that. So Texas Tech can get to the Big 12 title game, go undefeated, and I don't think they should be because we don't have the precedent set for this yet, of them being taken out. And honestly, I say this every year, and I know Levac's fatigued by it. If you were a conference, you root for the underdog in the conference title game because you hope the at-large team gets a bid and the conference winner gets a bid. I mean, that's what the 8 and 9 game schedules have been when it comes to conference. You hope your best teams get a shot to win a title. So I like Texas Tech. I can't find anyone on the schedule who's going to beat them. They're going to squash teams. Hammond's a fine quarterback. They're that leg. So, and we reset when we get to these teams. For some of you, you're looking at this now and saying, this is where I'm plus money. A 3-team parlay with Indiana, Oregon, and Texas Tech pays me plus 153 on DraftKings. I'll take that and I'll be done. And you'll hear me say that a few times as we have this conversation, that some of you will tune out and be like, okay, I'm good. Like, I'm not going 8 legs with you guys, but there's my plus money. I'm out. That's my wager. Goodbye. Okay. Do your thing. We're making a ton of money on this one. Let's move on to team number 4 that I feel the most confident in. And there they are, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Now, do I think Notre Dame can win a national championship? Absolutely. Stacked defense, the best defense in the country. Do I think C.J. Carr is a legitimate, not just Heisman Trophy contender, but maybe talks of him being the number 1 overall pick in the draft? Sure. Like, he's that good. And you've got the best offensive line in the country. And you're pissed off. Remember this, Notre Dame fans. Just remember this, because I'm going to say this a few times on this podcast, too. Notre Dame's in the playoff if Virginia wins. Huh? How? Wait, what? Remember that James Madison, that whole thing, right? Like, 2 Power 5 teams got into the postseason. It was Tulane and James Madison. 2 seeds were determined by that loss because Virginia would have been in. One of the Power 5s would have been kicked. Notre Dame would have been in. Miami fans, remember that too. Remember, Virginia won. One of those teams is kicked out, and you're probably not in it as an at-large. So things start to shift a little bit all of a sudden because of that Duke upset. Notre Dame's awesome. Now, here's the reason why I didn't have Notre Dame to start off this parlay, because Notre Dame is listed at minus 800 to make the college football playoff. Do you really want your starting wager to be a minus 800 wager? Their schedule is soft. We remember 2 years ago, Clemson and Penn State were talked about with soft, quote-unquote, schedules. Clemson and Penn State didn't sniff the playoff last year. Notre Dame does have teams on the schedule, like Miami and BYU that we've mentioned before, that are going to be tough games. Now, will they beat BYU? Probably, but BYU shouldn't be underrated. I love my Syracuse Orange. Syracuse beat Miami 2 years ago to cost the Hurricanes a bit of the college football playoff. And Fran Brown 2 years ago had a 10-win season, and that's a road game that maybe they're looking ahead, and they have no conference title game. Hell, Notre Dame might be 11-0 and sit their starters against Syracuse. I'm serious. Now, they'll probably want the number 1 seed. They want to beat everything else, but that's probably too Orange bias. But seriously, so let's play this out, okay? Let's say Notre Dame has 2 losses. No, let's do 1 first. Let's do 0 first. If Notre Dame doesn't have a loss, they're going to get a bye because of the restructuring of the seeding. So Notre Dame's probably going to be more likely to fall to the 2 seed because whoever wins the SEC or the Big Ten will likely get the 1 after the conference title game. Okay. So Notre Dame will fall between the 2 and the 3. And that's a pretty good spot. You get a bye, you get to the quarterfinals. Great. So let's say Notre Dame loses to Miami, which would be a fantastic game. So they're 11-1. So now all of a sudden they're going to be out of the playoff, especially if Miami either runs the table and goes undefeated, or even if Miami loses one game, Notre Dame's still going to be in the playoff. Okay, so let's say they lost 2 games. And let's say BYU beats Texas Tech in the Big 12 title game, which is possible, as we just laid out there. Isn't Notre Dame still in the postseason? So Notre Dame would potentially have 2 losses. They'd be 10-2, and their 2 losses would be to potentially an undefeated Miami Hurricane team and an 11-1 BYU team who's in the playoff. Like, I'm struggling to find a scenario where Notre Dame can actually miss it, like not being in it. They have to lose 3? They got to lose 3 games, Notre Dame, to not be in the college football playoff this year. I don't find that happening. That's very unlikely. So if you've got a 4-team college football playoff parlay right now with Oregon, Indiana, Texas Tech, and Notre Dame on DraftKings, that gets you to plus 184. For a lot of people, they'll take that any day of the week. We move on to team number 5 now. And that's the Georgia Bulldogs, the SEC. Somebody's coming out of the SEC. And again, this ranking here is a confidence ranking. Look across the SEC. It is a fun conference this season. The LSU Ole Miss thing is going to be great mid-September. Those are rants and craziness for another day. I love Ole Miss. I think Ole Miss is fantastic. Trinidad Chambliss, I can say this is a Heisman Trophy voter. That the only time I can talk about like a ranking of a Heisman player is preseason. And if you told me who is the best quarterback and who would be number 1 on my rankings now, it would be Chambliss. The moment the ball gets kicked off, everything changes. But of returning players who could have been potentially on my ballot, he would have ranked the highest. Kejuan Lace is the best running back in the country. Problem with Ole Miss is their schedule is stacked, and I can see them going 9-3. And that's great for Ole Miss football. Let's not lose perspective here. Like, a 9-3 season for Ole Miss used to be amazing. You dream of that. Not good enough to get you in the playoff. LSU, not rooting for Lane Kiffin. I don't know when we lost perspective that Brian Kelly is not a better coach than Lane Kiffin, because he is. Too much wackiness has happened down in the Bayou involving Coach O and Les Miles winning championships. Why didn't Lane just finish off Ole Miss and just win the title and become even better? I got too many questions with Ole Miss. Bama couldn't run the football last year. I don't know what's going on there. There's another SEC team I really like. I'm going to hold off for a second. But let's look at the Georgia Bulldogs, right? Georgia's won championships under Kirby Smart. Georgia has now gone to an SEC title game, not counting the COVID season, in 8 straight seasons. What else do you want out of Georgia? If you're not a Gunnar Stockton fan, I understand that. Like, I feel like whoever's the Georgia quarterback faces a ton of criticism, from Carson Beck to Jake Fromm. That's a tough spot from the days of Matthew Stafford. But quickly through the Georgia schedule: Tennessee State, Western Kentucky, Arkansas. Okay, not a lot of tests there. You get Oklahoma at home. You get Auburn at home. You get Florida at home. You go on the road to Ole Miss, who you should probably beat, and you go on the road to Bama. Do I think the Bulldogs can go undefeated? No. They could slip up somewhere along the schedule. By the way, I love Florida. But again, Florida had 8-4, 9-3 this season because of the change at coach, because of a quarterback no one's seen before, and more importantly, their offensive coordinator, old Buster, running the play calls for formerly at Georgia Tech. Somebody's got to get to 11-1 and 10-2. Somebody has to have less than 2 conference losses to potentially qualify for this. And because of seedings and tiebreakers and everything else, Georgia's the best of the bunch. So I'll put the Georgia Bulldogs here at number 5. And right now, some people are not thrilled by this parlay, because you've got 5 teams right now who I've given you some of their strengths and weaknesses, potential how they fall off, and I've only got you at plus 294. 5 legs of a parlay that doesn't even get you over plus 3-1 is not getting anybody excited right now. We'll get to the excitement right now, coming up in a little bit. But I understand the criticism of, like, come on. This isn't the most exciting. I thought we're getting 25,000-1. We'll build towards it, but I've got Georgia here at 5. Remember that SEC conversation we were just talking about, the team I liked? It's the Texas Longhorns here coming in at number 6. Texas burned me before last year when we missed on the parlay. But 2 years ago, we liked the Longhorns, and they were in it. It was a total separation a few years ago. 2 years ago, it was 4 teams dominated. Like, that's how I built it 2 years ago. It was 4 teams. Oregon and Ohio State were clearly better than everybody else in the Big Ten. Georgia and Texas were clearly better than everybody else in the SEC. Notre Dame had a soft schedule. Boise State was there. And then SMU was the gunner, the long shot that hit. But Texas this season brings everybody basically back. Like Arch Manning, it's one of the fun debates, and sometimes people feel like media members treat Arch Manning with kid gloves. They don't criticize him. Arch Manning's like was supposed to be the greatest thing ever. The hype around him. Truly, when you think about it, who's a bigger high school football prospect in college than Arch Manning? The answer is nobody. Like that, the reason he was so hyped is because he's an all-time hyped-up recruit ever. And what Texas did in the program and everything else, and he wasn't great. He was poor against Ohio State. Ohio State was really good last year. Arch Manning got better. He also played against worse teams. But the thing I say on our show all the time on Levac, it's one of my favorite phrases, guys can get better. You know, like we don't have to make an opinion after game 1 and keep it for game 10. We don't have to make an opinion when he's a sophomore and stick it when he's a junior. Like we can change the opinion when a player plays better or a team gets better because we'd just be irrational if we kept doing that. So Arch Manning should be better for Texas. Cam Campbell, I know the wide receiver on the outside. Everyone's going nuts about him. Great. They got a wide receiver. They got tons of recruits. They got a bunch of players who can make plays. Here's the thing that's awesome about Texas. They got 2 scenarios that can play out for them. Because we talked about these tiebreakers and everything else. So what if Texas gets to the SEC title game? Okay, let's play this scenario out. 11-1, I give you that same thing that just happened in the Big Ten title game. Doesn't matter what happens in the SEC title game. They're going to go to the playoff at 11-1. They get smoked in the SEC title game by Georgia. Who cares? They're still going to go. But what's fascinating is that what if Texas misses the SEC title game and they're at 10-2? Then they're in, right? Like Oklahoma didn't play in the title game last year and they never got questioned. Tennessee's in the mix somewhere one of those years, right? Like Tennessee didn't get in. So there's a benefit of the 3rd or 4th best team in the SEC actually not playing in the SEC title game and getting to the postseason. And what's interesting about Texas is that Texas's resume can be built and they can get in at 10-2. Quickly to the Longhorns schedule. Ohio State in a redemption game. I actually think they're going to beat Ohio State this time. So Texas could be potentially talked about as the number 1 team in the country. They got to go to Tennessee. Remember, Tennessee had Georgia on the ropes last year, and Tennessee looks to be improved. Heupel and everything he's done. So you get Tennessee on the road. You get Oklahoma at home. Ole Miss at home. And then you got to go on the road to College Station to close out the season. You got to go to LSU. Those are tough games, right? So let me give it to you one more time. Ohio State, Tennessee, Oklahoma, Florida, Ole Miss, LSU, Texas A&M. So that's 7 really tough games. If you drop 2, you're in the college football playoff. That's it. So because Texas has some ways to get there, and those quality victories are going to improve that, and one more time, if they beat Ohio State, they're going to be, in my opinion, should be the number 1 team in the country because their resume will be better than a lot of these teams in front of them, right? Like, Oregon's not going to have a better win than Texas by October. Run through it. Indiana, Texas Tech, Notre Dame, Georgia. Nobody's going to have a better win than Texas. So if Texas beats one of the best teams in the country, how I would vote for the AP Top 25 and how I would rank it is that Texas should be the number 1 team. So the Longhorns are going to be commanding that top of that spot for a long time, and it's hard for them to fall so far back when we get, this is like March Madness now, right? Like, there's no such thing as a good loss. That doesn't exist. You have bad losses, you have good wins, but there's no such thing as a good loss. Somehow in college football, we lose that perspective. Okay, so now we added the Texas Longhorns, so now we're at plus 491. This is where chaos hits for me. This is why we waited so long to put this thing out. Because I fought over a ton of teams here. And if you're still with us 30 minutes into this, we appreciate you. And I know you're watching the graphic, seeing who the next couple teams are. Here's what you have to remember. The teams you think are coming next are not coming up next. This is where the bomb starts to build. And for some of you who don't remember how the college football playoff format bracket is structured, is you got to get 4 of the highest ranking conference champions in a group of 5. Do we call it the group of 6 now with the Pac-12? Well, a team who's not in the big 4 gets in. And now this is where the parlay jumps. Because team number 7 is the UNLV Rebels. If you add UNLV as your 7th team on your parlay jumps from, we'll call it 5 here, right? 5-1 to 58-1. UNLV is listed as a 9-1 odd to get to the college football playoff. Now, UNLV plus 900 for those who need to get that confused a little bit more. So UNLV comes from the Mountain West. UNLV, when it stacks up against these teams who are not from the Power Four, Boise State, who's been kind of thrown in there by most people, is listed at plus 450. Memphis is listed at 10-1, a little bit lower, but UNLV will play Memphis in week 0 coming up here, which is a massive game for UNLV. Memphis also with a new head coach, right? John Summerall's off to Florida. So out of the gates, the Rebels have an opportunity to improve their resume. UNLV stunk as a college football program forever in my life. But they've gone to 3 straight Mountain West championship games. Tiebreakers have played a factor in so many other things in the history of UNLV. But UNLV cannot get by Boise State. That's it. Like, UNLV has constantly tried to be the one. Think about, we're going to go do another reference from 2024. Think about that one. When UNLV plays Boise State, Ashton Genty's in that game. That's the Heisman game where people wanted Ashton Genty to get the Heisman after how well he played against UNLV. But UNLV's in most of that game. And if the Runnin' Rebels, can I call them the Runnin' Rebels? Is it just the Rebels? When they lose that game, all of a sudden they're out. But for the people who would have picked them to win that game, they would have been in the college football playoff. So we look at UNLV football and wonder, okay, so how can they actually take the next step? What do they have to do to be better? Dan Mullen's a fantastic coach. He's right there as building that program. I know he hasn't always been the guy there because he joined that program and they had tons of transfers last season. But UNLV needed Boise to leave, and they did. Boise State left the conference. Boise State's in the Pac-12. And if you are a Boise State fan, trust me, I get it. I understand why you feel a lot more confident taking Boise than UNLV. Boise State, more fun, the blue turf, Ashton Genty, higher, plus 450 to plus 900. But here's where it's going to get real interesting with Boise State. How, who, where, what, how are they going to swing this thing with the Boise State narrative of the Pac-12, 10, 8, right? Because ESPN has dogged the Pac-2 for years. Despite Washington State coming with that flag at College Game Day, everyone dogged Washington State. They dogged Oregon State, saying it's trash, it's no good. And a lot of Oregon State fans and Washington State fans blame ESPN for ripping up the Pac-12 because ESPN wanted to bring the teams to the SEC and the Big 12. And then Fox had a hand in it because they wanted teams in the Big 10. So they blame these television networks for big noon kickoff and College Game Day. And they say, well, the reason they suck is because, so now they're going to swing it. So now because Boise State's in the Pac-8, you're going to tell me that it's a great conference all of a sudden. I love the take that some people have had about Boise State, which is wild. Well, they play Oregon week 1. If they're close, then that's a win. Huh? So if Boise State gets smacked by Oregon, we're just going to think, well, they played Oregon, so that makes them good? Now, the Broncos' schedule looks like this. They get Memphis in similar fashion to UNLV. South Dakota, Western Michigan, Utah State, Fresno State, and then we start diving into the Pac-8, we'll call it. Washington State, Texas State, Colorado State, Oregon State, San Diego State. Now, San Diego State's actually pretty solid. Oregon State, everything else. But UNLV as a conference overall, the Mountain West, some would argue, have hurt themselves by letting some schools go away. I would argue and say, which ones? Like New Mexico's perceived to be one of the top teams out there. That game against Hawaii, I actually think the Rebels, I'm nervous. I think they're actually going to lose that game against Hawaii when they got to go to the island. So UNLV is going to finish on their 10-2 or 11-1, and it's going to come down to who do we think is better, UNLV or Boise State. And the argument can be made, well, Boise State's been in the past, but that we can't do that anymore. You can't do that anymore. If you perceive the Pac-12, we'll call it whatever conference, you get it. Boise State's conference isn't as good as the Mountain West. We can't for years tell you it stinks, and all of a sudden, well, now Boise's here, so now they're better. I love UNLV. The win over Memphis, the win over Hawaii, and potentially running the table in their schedule versus Boise's schedule should in the end give them a better resume. Now, some will tell me the numbers will say like it's like 120 is UNLV's strength of schedule. Then right now, preseason in August, Boise, because of the Oregon matchups, is stronger because of how good Oregon is. I don't care. Nope. At the end of the season, I would rather have UNLV in that spot than Boise. And I can't make an argument why I think Boise's good besides their name is Boise State. Because Genty was good. I'm not biting. Nope. Not biting on it. I'd rather run with a team who's been in this spot, and I can dive into coaching cliches of the seniors want it more. This is their moment. It's Friday night. Baba. I love it. I love Vegas as my group of 5 team, and it's hard, right? James Madison got in because they had some losses and they played poorly. Tulane barely got in. Tulane was talked about for a lot of the season, but they had a bunch of losses. So the group of 5's tough to pick, but I love Vegas this year. So we're down to our final team. Now, some are shocked right now because 2 teams have not been mentioned. And you're looking at me thinking like, gosh, where's Ohio State? And where's Miami? What are we doing here? Where's Ohio State and where's Miami? You know what? Let's just reveal who the final team is here on the college football playoff parlay. Remember how we told you it was going to get to 25,001? Of course I'm going back to SMU. Of course we're going to make this a 26,514 parlay, and my Mustangs are 8. Before you get frustrated with me and saying, this is ridiculous. Why is Miami not on here? Why is Ohio State not on here? Let's start with the Buckeyes first because that one's a little easier to explain. Okay, so let's talk about Ohio State. I told you I think they're going to lose to Texas. So now Ohio State's going to be 1-1 on the season. Their schedule gets kind of easy after that. You get Kent State, you get Illinois, you get Iowa. All right. But then you draw Indiana, USC, back-to-back games on the road, Oregon, and Michigan. Let me give that to you one more time. Let's give you those 5 opponents. Texas, Indiana, USC, Oregon, and Michigan. At one point, Ohio State's going to go 9-3. Could they go undefeated? Sure they could. Could they go 11-1? Of course. But I'm going off odds here, right? Like, you can sell me that Ohio State's going to lose 2 games. And if Ohio State loses 2 games, they're not going to play in the Big Ten title game. And I know I gave you an argument earlier in the show about Texas benefiting from 10-2. So could Ohio State finish the season 10-2 and then do the at-large bids? They're in? Yeah, they could. But there's also a chance they're not going to get to 2. They're going to get to 3 losses. Could Ohio State lose to Oregon, Indiana, and Texas? Yes. So would a 9-3 Ohio State team get in? That's a little tougher. That's a little bit more difficult. Could an Ohio State team at 10-2 get in if USC is also 10-2 and one of their 2 losses is to USC? Who would you pick then? Well, head-to-head tiebreaker would matter. USC is listed at plus 240. Ohio State's listed at minus 380. So that's my problem with Ohio State. It's not that I don't think Julian Sain's a fantastic quarterback. It's not that I don't think Jeremiah Smith is talked about as the greatest wide receiver prospect in the history of this thing. It's just that if you're giving me Ohio State at minus 380, that at DraftKings is the second highest favorite on the board to make the college football playoff, and more than any other team since we've been doing this thing, I think they can lose 3 games. That's not a great bet to put in a parlay. It's just not. If their schedule was different, we'd have a whole different conversation. If their number was different, we'd have a different conversation. But I'm not putting a minus 380 team in here that I think can lose 3 games and potentially lose a tiebreaker to USC, and USC's at plus money. So that's why Ohio State's not in there. Let's flip it to Miami, okay? So Miami's awesome. And if you listen to Levac and Gaz last year, I fell in love with the Hurricanes. I watched those games against Florida State. I watched those early September games. I'm like, nobody can block these guys. Ruben Bain. You know how look at this. I'm a Buccaneer fan. You know how excited I was to see Ruben Bain get drafted by the Bucs? He's the best defensive lineman in college football since Aiden Hutchinson. It was obvious. Messidor, the same thing. They dominated up front. But here's what Miami Hurricane fans have to recognize. Here's what they got to remember. Every time the Miami Hurricanes have had high preseason expectations the last 20 years, they haven't reached them. Like they become the biggest choke artists in college football the last 20 years. And someone say that doesn't matter. It's a different world. It's college football is totally different. It's NIL. It's this. It's that. Miami's paying for players. Those are good arguments. I got to nod that. Like, yeah, that's true. Okay, but let's think about the last 2 years of Miami football. All right, way back about 25 minutes ago, I told you that Miami would not have been in the college football playoff if Virginia won. Virginia would have been the highest ranking of these power conference teams. Virginia would have slid right in. They would have bumped out James Madison. So James Madison's out. Notre Dame's in. But because they get beat, now another conference champion spot opens up and they get in. And then Notre Dame gets bumped out because Miami gets in. That's how I looked at it. Now, the committee could argue a different way and everything else, but they both could have been on the sideline. So Miami needed some things to work in their favor to get in. It did. They got in. Miami was not in the college football playoff until the end of the conference championship weekend. We all know that. It was like the great debate, right? But Miami, let's go back to 2024 Miami, who is still yet to win an ACC championship, who I believe has only played in the ACC title game once. That might be zero. COVID got a little weird, though. I know Pitt won with Kenny Pickett. So Miami is pacing with Cam Ward to get to the college football playoff and win an ACC championship. What happens to Miami in 24? They blow a 2-touchdown lead to Syracuse at the JMA Wireless Dome, and the Hurricanes go down to the Orange, and the Orange win 10 games. So you had your moment in 24. They didn't get it done. And there's some wild games in that one, right? That Virginia Tech finish was insane. So Miami's not as good as everyone thought they were in 24. In 25, they get to the national championship. Of course they do. They're really good. But remember what happened in the 25 season. Again, they didn't play in the ACC title game because it was Duke and it was Virginia and SMU and everything. I think I said Virginia throughout the show, but like SMU's in that mix too and everything else. Like, what are we doing? Craziness. The ACC title game and all these tiebreakers, and things had changed as the game went on. I think I said SMU's in the ACC title game. It was Virginia in overtime. What a wild game. So SMU beat Miami last year. Louisville beat Miami last year. In that game, they throw 5 picks. So you're telling me that a team who couldn't finish the job in 2 games last year in the ACC, who couldn't get to the ACC title game, Darian Mensah, think what you want of him. I'm not the biggest fan. I think in some big moments he hasn't won the big game yet. I'm not taking the Hurricanes. Minus 280 on the board with those reasons. But if you don't love that play, you're like, guys, you're being a little foolish, you're being stubborn here at the Miami thing, let me just walk you through this again one more time with SMU. SMU, who hit the college football playoff, is the last team in 2 seasons ago, crashed the party, has only lost 2 conference games since they've joined the ACC. And SMU's got some interesting matchups here coming up, right? Like that week 1 game against Florida State, I don't love it. Don't love that spread. Remember, Florida State was a top 10 team in the country when they smashed Alabama in September last year. Don't love that one going down to Tallahassee. But really, the season for SMU comes down to the Louisville game on September 19th. SMU is going to be favored in every game for the rest of the year. This is what SMU's schedule looks like post-Louisville. Missouri State, Boston College, Virginia, Cal, Syracuse, Virginia Tech, Wake Forest. Where are they losing? That Blacksburg, that game's at SMU, and they close out the season with Notre Dame and Stanford. Let's say SMU enters the Notre Dame game with 1 loss. Now we can play it 2 ways. If they have 1 loss going to Notre Dame, and then you've got 2 losses, but Notre Dame's a non-conference, you're still likely going to be the top seed in the ACC, and you're going to chance against Miami. SMU to win the ACC is floating around like plus 750. And let me make sure I tell people what they get one more time there to make the playoff. Plus 350. Plus 350 to get to the playoff. So when the Notre Dame game is going to roll around, SMU, 2 things are going to happen, right? Win or lose. If SMU beats Notre Dame, which I don't think they will. Remember when we did the Notre Dame preview, I said the only tough games for the Fighting Irish were BYU and Miami. But SMU's on the schedule. So let's say SMU loses to Notre Dame, which I think they will. And I think they're actually going to be undefeated going to that game against Notre Dame. So I've got an 11-win SMU team. I got an 11-1 SMU. And I've got an undefeated Miami team in the ACC title game. We told you about it in the Big Ten. We told you about it in the SEC. We got to stay consistent, committee. If we're not going to penalize these teams for losing the conference title game, You can't penalize the ACC like you didn't 2 years ago. So if I get an 11-1 SMU team in the ACC title game, two things are going to happen. Either they're getting in no matter what, or they are going to get in and just beat Miami. I'm great either way. If I got a plus money ticket in my pocket of round robin this thing, and I got SMU and Miami might be like, we don't care. We're getting in and we're undefeated. Like, it doesn't matter. They're going to get in. If Miami, now here's where it gets really interesting, right? If Miami's got one loss, okay, let's say Miami loses to Notre Dame, and let's say SMU loses to Notre Dame, and they're both 11-1 in the ACC title game. We still following that rule that the conference championship game doesn't matter? We've been giving it to you a few times on the show, right? So if we're just going to go by rational thinking and we're going to one more time say it doesn't matter, they're both getting in. That's how we get to 26,514. You look at the conference title games and wonder what is going to matter, what's not going to matter. And if we go by that rationale and we go by these records and who's going to be favored, we can work this 8-pick parlay to another monster cash out. Do what you will with these picks, but that is the pick. That is an 8-leg college football playoff parlay. Round robin that, baby. I hope it made sense. At Tom Goss, TOMG, it was easy. I just talked for a while. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you cashed those tickets. We're back later this week with Brian Mariano and Andrew Champagne, Sean Martin as well. Talk to you later. Let's cash that ticket, baby.